Okay, so, you're free to go. But we're cool, right?
Yeah.
Ba 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 bum 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 ba da. You must be feeling extra ripped off by PlayStation lately. To that I say, excellent. For far too long, Sony has been screwing you over. You just didn't notice because you were going along with this trend that their games are 10 out of 10 bangers.
You're living in a fantasy.
Now that we've had time to let the dust settle, we get to see what PlayStation truly is.
Well, I think it's not good.
Want to be a little more specific?
There's good and there's not good. This is not good.
It's a brand that relies heavily, and I mean heavily, on third-party exclusivity. Let's face it, the first-party stuff on PlayStation is not as great as people make it out to be.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
Oftentimes when you hear people talk about the absolute best on PlayStation, it's always referring to the third-party content that's been heavily supported throughout the years. Well, but before we dive into today's news and today's salt, I thought it'd be very important of me to point out the current state of PlayStation. Because we're talking about Microsoft being down, Microsoft this, Microsoft that, every other week. Microsoft had no money, no revenue, no games, no bitches, because we were all having too much fun picking on Microsoft. But when it comes time to criticize PlayStation, that's truly where the lunacy comes out. Square Enix will aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PC.
Diversify earnings opportunities by strengthening customer contact points, shift the multi-platform strategy. For HD titles, the group will aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs, especially in regards to major franchises and AAA titles, including catalog titles. It will build an environment where more customers can enjoy our titles. In addition, it will also devise a platform strategy for SD titles that include not only iOS and Android, but also the possibility of PC launches. Furthermore, the group will strive to maximize the acquisition of new users when launching a title, and that of recurring users after starting management of game operation.
So, for all that the PlayStation crowd gives the Xbox crowd about not buying games, it turns out PlayStation sales aren't cutting it anymore. What? You mean to tell me Square Enix noticed that there is more money to be made not withholding your game from other platforms for a limited time period or permanently? No! What? But I thought everybody in the world played on PlayStation! No!
My life is a lie! My life is a lie!
Honestly, is anybody really surprised with the current cost of development, how long it takes? Are AAA companies really expect to double, hell, even quadruple their investments on one platform? Expectations from publishers are getting exceedingly harder to meet by the year. And the truth is, this console generation has been an utter disappointment. I mean, we're talking about a company that foolishly invested in a timed exclusive called Forspoken. Same company that killed off Tomb Raider and Deus Ex so that Forspoken could exist. I'm pretty sure their financial troubles aren't too hard to figure out. The investment in making third-party exclusivity for PlayStation was very short-sighted. There was no longevity in it. The world does not solely play on PlayStation. It's really funny whenever I get a console gamer to realize how insignificant the console market is compared to mobile and PC. They see their games on posters and buses and Super Bowl ads, yet somehow the games that don't have any type of promotional material to that degree eclipse everything Square Enix has put out in sales in the last 10 years. And we're talking indie titles that are nothing more than asset flips that aren't even complete, like Palworld. How the mighty have fallen. There's just simply less interest in Square games than ever before. And for that reason, you want to go multi-platform. There really isn't an option. AAA studios invest millions upon millions of dollars on these games, and the first thing they do is lock it to solely one store. And they wonder for years, how come we don't have new users? The obvious was always there, so you begin to wonder, how much was PlayStation paying them before? Must have been paying them something that was enough to keep them afloat, keep them invested in doing this, but that time is over. Whatever PlayStation was paying out is clearly not enough. And honestly, this is a good thing. If it results in more Square games launching day one on all platforms, instead of killing the potential of the Final Fantasy remake by doing the boneheaded decision of locking it to PlayStation, then yeah, don't be surprised when you get new users, new fans. It's going to be a night and day difference for Square.
Building continuous customer contact points of our titles by stepping up digital sales with the group will strengthen user flow of digital sales of new titles at the time of launch. Regarding the initiatives of promotion, in addition, it will generate the opportunity of generating revenue is our rich catalog titles lineup, which leads to strengthen its earnings base by expanding sales of catalog titles. Moreover, the group will engage in initiatives which focus on the acquisition of PC users.
I told those filthy console peasants. I told them years ago, all these AAA companies are gonna turn around and realize they were making the dumbest decisions ever by locking their games to consoles. All the AAA developers are now focusing on us PC users. Why? Because they realize that if they play all of their cards right, they have the potential to make the most amount of profit they ever have on any title. We've essentially cucked the console users out of their own exclusives. It's beautiful. It's all I've ever strived for. I am quite vindicated after years of being laughed at by console users, telling me this is never going to happen. I'm living in a fantasy. Square Enix comes out and basically says, yeah, well, you know, we're gonna focus on pushing more towards the PC users. Sorry, PlayStation guys, I know you were there day one with Final Fantasy VII on the PS1, but that was so goddamn long ago, it's incomparable to today's market. This strategy not working for our company anymore. PC users, here we come. We know you're pirates, and yet you still buy more than console users.
PS5 owners are now treated like black people in 1939 USA. We are now second-class gamers, and neither Sony nor Square care about us anymore. Just like black people had to give up their civil rights, we PlayStation gamers are having to forfeit our exclusives.
Get hundreds on the table, 20s on the floor.
I have a dream that PS5 games will be everywhere. Are you kidding me? This has got to be a troll. There's no other way. I know some PlayStation fanboys really do mean it, but he's definitely not one of the ones that means it. First off, no, PlayStation wasn't treating you like black people. There is no Obama PS5. Every black person's had to work for their own PlayStations, and they deserve better. But it ain't a race thing, white people too. And don't get me started on the Japanese folks. They have it the roughest with PlayStation. They got to see it in its golden years, and now this is the console that they've been dealt with. I feel bad for them the most. They invented the damn thing. As for you, nothing was stopping you from trying other platforms a long time ago. No one forced you to stay on the PlayStation plantation, picking SSDs in the SSD field. People say the darnest things to get attention these days. Whatever happened to having talent or skills to get attention? Now you just have to be stupid and it's good enough. Ignorance is rewarded more than intelligence. The only thing you are correct about is you are second-class gamers. Always have been. PC gaming has been better for a very long time. Or I mean butter. Sony and Square indeed do not care about you, but it's not some form of segregation. You guys are simply not paying up enough. PlayStation wants to port to PC, Square wants to go multi-plat, and that's because of you guys. Neither of you are actually buying these games. As much as you brag about them on Twitter, the state of PlayStation is on you. Spending all that time laughing at the other box for underperforming led you to forgetting you have to support your own platform if you don't want to look like a jackass. This is why console wars are harmful. It's two sides flinging shit at each other and forgetting that they have to play games. Console warring is one of the leading causes for games underperforming so hard. People enjoy banter more than the content. And that's sad. I mean, that's both on Microsoft and Sony for having such lackluster titles. But when there is something good, neither side seems to really buy it. But, you know, comparing these video games to civil rights, now that's just wild. You don't have a right to exclusivity, and you don't have a right to your console succeeding either. The only right you have is in deciding who you want to support. And clearly, based on hardware sales being down for PlayStation and software, I'm gonna go ahead and assume you're not doing that.
Listen, the real story here. Sales of games are actually up, you. It's the revenue of MMO that's falling rapidly that contributed to the losses. Wasn't Final Fantasy just ported to Xbox? Looks like it's not performing well there.
Oh yeah, up by an entire 1%. Bravo. Impressive. Yeah, thank you. Final Fantasy 16 and 7 Rebirth and Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster and Dragon Quest Monsters 3. You've contributed 1% to the growth. Jackass. Are you forgetting that their operating income is down by 38%? Now, normally under most circumstances, lessening the cost of your operation is good. But in the case with Square, it's not a good sign because it's dropping in order to save money due to the cost other products are causing them. Their development costs and advertising is killing them, and PlayStation's exclusivity on top of that is not helping. The damage control for PlayStation is unbelievable, completely overlooking all the other negatives because, again, if they can avoid putting the burden on PlayStation, they will. They'll be there to defend them, when in reality, Sony's bag is not covering all the costs over there at Square. Now, I'm not going to say it's entirely Sony's fault. They are paying for exclusivity, expecting it to work. That's just business. Square, on the other hand, has been on a losing streak doing this for quite some time, and they've decided to still stay doing it. So any loss that they are feeling right now has to do with their pure incompetence. I would have ditched this unsustainable practice years ago. Instead, it's cost them. And because of that, now they don't have Tomb Raider or Deus Ex anymore. They have to sell that off. Imagine what else they're gonna sell off soon. It's not looking good for Square. And people want PlayStation to buy them? Yeah, no. If PlayStation was to buy Square, that would be it. It would close down the studios, making them no money, lay off a lot of employees, and they would cancel projects constantly. Square would just continue to shrink. Exclusivity is bad. It doesn't help. I think I've made my point clear with that about Square. As I expected, Square Enix is becoming more multi-platform. I expect lots of announcements of games being ported to PC, Xbox, and eventually Switch 2 in the next year.
Square Enix, $70 games, never going to sell on Xbox.
You know, it's real funny, isn't it? After all that talk about how Game Pass is the problem, subscription models created by companies like Microsoft are the reason games aren't successful, and these services are bad and need to go away. Yeah, after all that talk, turns out the alternative produces about similar results. Not being on a subscription service doesn't mean your game is going to succeed, so it's absolutely hilarious to see all these theories PlayStation fanboys come up with are debunked over time. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here thinking, maybe if you put Final Fantasy Classic HD titles on Game Pass and get some of that Microsoft bread, you'd be able to help yourselves out a bit, Square, because PlayStation sales are not cutting it. Nobody has a definitive answer. Everyone's bullshitting you. But when the numbers come in, it tells a completely different story. Square Enix confirms US EU layoffs as part of restructuring. Alright, Twitter, I challenge you to prove to me the Xbox tax isn't real today. I want to see non-stop bitching and complaining about this for the next 5 to 7 days. And if you don't keep that same energy, then you prove the Xbox tax is indeed real. Square Enix is doing everything people complain Microsoft does. Getting rid of their studios, getting rid of exclusivity, and now laying off people. If all of those things are enough to justify crying for an entire week, then I fully expect Square Enix to receive the same treatment. But we know they won't. Square Enix's digital entertainment sales were ever so slightly up, mainly thanks to its HD game subsegment, the firm said. The solid performances of Final Fantasy XVI, Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster, Dragon Quest Monsters, The Dark Prince, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth saw HD game sales increase to 636 million versus the 503 million from the previous fiscal year. Now let me ask you, do you think investors or Square Enix themselves are satisfied with ever so slightly increases to their digital sales like that? No, of course not. They're looking at that piss poor increase and thinking to themselves, that Switch 2 can't come soon enough. Just imagine how much more money we would be making if Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was on PC, PlayStation, Switch 2, and Xbox day one. PlayStation's bag isn't securing us anymore. Let's face it, these games should not be increasing just ever so slightly. They should be causing consoles to fly off the shelves. It's Square Enix, it's a Final Fantasy, for God's sake. What's going on? A lack of interest because main entry Final Fantasy games have been locked behind a platform that not everybody in the world owns. There is no way in hell this company is satisfied with such minimal growth after all of that investment. And people wanted to use these financial highlights as some sort of gotcha to prove to me the exclusivity isn't the problem. Bullshit. These were some of their most highly invested products. Growth should be skyrocketing. Either way, it's only good news. Square Enix wanting to port to more platforms and do away with these antiquated business models that were only really beneficial during an era where console gaming was a lot more niche is only good for the consumer. Being able to have these games day one on your platform of choice is good for you and clearly good for Square. Sony's bottom line be damned. You guys aren't pulling through. Square needs other gamers, just like I need your like, your comment, your share, your subscription. That being said, I'll see you in the next one.
Fritongo sucks ass.